Do you feel that most business owners out there make bad hiring decisions out of fear that they're hiring someone smarter than they are, more capable than they are, or that they're breeding potential competition?
Really is what we refer to as the presenting problem. That's Peter Block's term, presenting problem. That's what they're seeing or what they're giving us.
The lack of ability to execute, as much as it is, they're not accountable to anybody.
Owning any type of restoration business is demanding of your time, your energy, and resources. And that's why we're here. This is Restoration Domination. If you're a contractor in water mitigation, mold remediation, biohazard cleanup, roofers, or public adjusters, you'll learn how to dominate using some of the techniques and strategies that our guests will share. We'll interview top industry insiders, movers and shakers, hustlers and hackers, and anyone dominating their industry. This is Restoration Domination. Hustle, hack, and dominate. And here's your host, Rico Garcia.
All right, everybody. Welcome back to the show. Today, I'm very, very excited. I've got a guest today that I've actually wanted to have on for quite some time, and I really think that he's going to be adding a tremendous amount of value if you're in the restoration business, if you're an entrepreneur, period. I mean, this is the guy who's got, I would say, a lot of the answers to the questions that you're probably asking yourself on a day-to-day basis. And even more so important than that is he's also just released a brand new book, which he was kind enough to send to me, and I thought it was absolutely fantastic. But without further ado, the one and only Chuck Violand, welcome to Restoration Domination.
Rico, thank you so much. It's great seeing you again.
Likewise. So let's start off, let's just jump right into the book first and foremost,
Sure.
The Entrepreneurial Conspiracy. So let's talk to me about the book and what inspired the book, and yeah.
The book is a long time in its development. 25 years, really 34 years I've been working with small business owners, helping them grow their businesses. And as I worked with them, it became clear early on that the chief issues that they had with growing their businesses had little to do with competitors, had little to do with processes and systems. What it had to do with was their behaviors. Because in spite of how many systems they had, in spite of how great their product was, or how light their competitors were, they would only scale it to their own personal abilities and their thinking. And so I started noticing different behaviors that repeated themselves over and over again. And you connect the dots, you do anything for any length of time, and you can kind of connect those dots. And so I boiled it down. I mean, there's a million different behaviors that we bring to this, to growing our businesses. But I boiled it down to 6 that I saw repeating themselves on a routine basis that really got in the way. And so I identified those and wrote about them, identifying, Rico, frequently they start out as strengths when they start their business, but as their business grows, they become weaknesses and they get in the way, and they can cause real damage to a business and a whole lot of frustration to the owners. And understand, many of the behaviors, I write about in here, I own. In other words, I'm a small business owner. I'm an entrepreneur too. I write these things when I'm looking in the mirror. So I possess them as well.
Right. And why the word conspiracy?
Because we don't see them. Conspiracy is a popular term now, and that was unintentional because it's been called the conspiracy for some time, at least as I was giving presentations on it. But they're behaviors that we don't see, and because we've lived with them most of our lives, and other people around us see them, they can point them out, but we don't. So they conspire without our knowledge to derail us, to hold us back from the things that we say we want to achieve in our businesses.
Right. And from saying that you want to achieve something and knowing it conceptually to actually making the shift, not only mentally, but also getting your body in line with what you want mentally to do, it's a totally different game. right? So when you're looking at businesses and when you're looking at business owners, and obviously a lot of people go to your organization for coaching and whatnot, how difficult is it to get past the mental roadblocks that a lot of entrepreneurs bring to the table in their own business?
That's probably the biggest piece. If you think about the way that we view many of the clients that we work with, many of the companies that we work with, we view them as a high-performance sports team, like Division I college football or pro football. If you use that as an example, the people that you typically have in that business, or that you want to attract to that business, they have the technical skills. Those are the table stakes just to play the game. So they arrive with that. The challenge that they have is escalating those skills, continuing to grow the technical skills so that they can perform well in their businesses, but more importantly, so that they can make the mental shift within themselves to be a top echelon player. And that always starts with the owner of the business. That's the entrepreneur, the founder. And if that founder is not willing to be coached, and if they are not coachable, it's silly to hire us. But when they're willing to be coached, then you can really make some progress.
Right. So typically, what's the process? Let's say, for example, that I contacted you as a restoration company. I'm like, hey, Chuck, I've got this business. I'm doing X amount of revenue per year. I really want to do more. I want to have a bigger impact. Typically, walk me through that process with your organization. What questions do you start asking? What do you want to see in my business? What's that process genuinely look like?
The process generally looks like, and it depends on where we make contact. If we meet you at a trade show or a program that we're doing, more than likely I'm going to have a conversation with you. If you call the office, it's probably going to start with Jeff Jones. He's our Director of Sales and Marketing. And Jeff's been doing this for 7 or 8 years now. No, actually 8 or 9 years. And so he's been talking to business owners long enough to understand what the challenges are that they're typically facing. Now, Rico, your question's good, because frequently the challenge that the client or that the prospect is bringing to us really is what we refer to as the presenting problem. That's Peter Block's term, presenting problem. That's what they're seeing, or what they're giving us. But as soon as you start to talk with them and dig a little bit deeper, you see the underlying issues that contribute to what they're saying to us. So that's a big piece, going back to your question, that's a very big piece of our initial conversations. Let's get beyond the surface thing. Let's drill down in and see what the real issues are that underlie this. And one of the biggest challenges, in my opinion, one of the biggest challenges I feel that these owners have is allowing themselves to be vulnerable to us. That's scary. Most small business owners, business founders, are very protective of their information and very protective of their egos. So for them to open up and share with us what the challenges are in their business, that takes an enormous amount of courage and vulnerability on their part. Our job is to get to that. And then we can lay out a plan or a strategy to help them achieve the things that they say they want to achieve in their business.
Right. So basically you're going to more of the entrepreneur himself and trying to figure out, hey, this is where you are right now. You're saying that you want to be here. Are you ready to be open and exposed and vulnerable? And do you also have the willingness to change? So that would be number one. Mm-hmm. And if you can get to that point, then we can move on to the next stage, right? Which then I would assume is probably more along the lines of looking at strategy, looking at their market, what they're doing and what they're not doing. Typically, what does that process look for you guys? Once you already have an entrepreneur who says, you know what, this is me, this is what I've got, open book, that he's a coachable guy or gal. Mm-hmm. From there, what do you guys typically do? Do you have a cookie cutter type of deal, even though every business is totally different? Or are you tailoring it specific to the actual business and to the territory and services that they want to perform?
That's a great question. While many of the contracts that we put together look similar, each one of them is tailored individually, not only to that market and the services that client produces, but also to the owner and the teams that they've built around them. So when we're looking at that, the technical issues that they have in their business, those are usually the easiest ones to deal with. It's when you get into the people issues, when you get into the entrepreneur issues, the behaviors, that's where the real work begins. And so when you're talking to that owner, you want to make sure that they're aware of the difficult work that's going to have to take place in order to have a different outcome than the one they're having right now. And that always involves mental work on the part of that owner and their willingness to suffer through it. And it's scary. I mean, it really is. Right. It's difficult. I remember the first consultant that I hired when I was a 33-year-old business owner. And it was alarming. I mean, it was frightening to me. And I resisted changing. Right. But I realized that as soon as I started listening to what the guy was saying and following his counsel, things started to change in my business.
And more business owners, I think now with the internet the way that it is, and with so much information out there, and podcasts such as these, and YouTube videos and everything else, like people now I feel are a little bit more open to getting mentorship, to getting coaching. They understand the value. They understand the value of accountability. Sometimes it's not even their lack of execution or lack of ability to execute as much as it is they're not accountable to anybody. They're like, you know what, I'll do it tomorrow. Or yes, I know that I have the capacity to do this, but no one's really putting their feet to the fire. So just that alone, by having a mentor, having a coach, having someone who's there guiding you and getting on a weekly, monthly, quarterly call makes all the difference in the world sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Well, that sounds an awful lot like the second behavior in the book, doesn't it?
It does.
No accountability. And you're absolutely right. I had a woman explain it to me this way, Rico. She's a very successful business owner and also an elite athlete, all right? And her comment to me was, she says, I've had coaches. I believe it's tennis and equestrian that she's competitive in. Interesting combination. But she made the comment, she says, I've always had coaches. I still have coaches. And she's an elite athlete. So one would think that an elite athlete is going to say, I've got this thing mastered. I don't need coaches anymore. And her comment was, absolutely wrong. The higher you go and the more you want to compete, the more you want to succeed, the more you need that coach, that accountability piece. And that's a big piece of it. The person who will push you further than you'll push yourself.
Right. Right. Now, what do you find is the number one behavior, if you can even isolate one behavior, that really makes it difficult for a business owner who is saying that he wants to change, saying that he wants more, saying that he wants to have more of an impact, and he has all the tools. He's got everything there, but it's just what typically would hold that guy back from taking his business to the next level? Is it one behavior in particular, or is it a series of behaviors? Like, in your experience, like, what have you noticed?
No, it's a series of behaviors. It's rare that any possesses just one. Okay, I possess all six. Okay, as an example. However, if I were to identify one that I think stands out and that casts the biggest shadow, hands down, Rico, it would be swollen ego. And the reason for that is that it underlays so many of the other behaviors that are resident in the book. And so when we can't manage our ego, and I make this comment in presentations that I do, when a business owner is making business decisions based on ego gratification, satisfying their own egos, rather than good, sound, logical business decisions, it's never a question of if their business will stall or fail. It's just when, because it will happen. It's happened every single time that I've seen it with a business owner who can't manage their ego. I don't think you ever completely suppress it. And quite frankly, I'm not sure that that's the goal. But managing the ego, understanding when it raises its head and how it influences the other things that you do in your business, that's the key, so that you can then manage that.
So what would you recommend for a business owner who's like, you know what, I probably do need to go ahead and put my ego in check, or I need to not make ego-based decisions? Like, what actions would you recommend for a person like that to take?
Yeah, it's never easy. And you want to talk about one that we fall off the wagon very easily if we don't have somebody working with us. This would be the one. There are a couple behaviors or a couple strategies that I outlined in the book. One of them, and probably the easiest one for anybody to address is to pay attention to how often and how easily you ask permission from the people in your organization, that you thank them for the input, that you welcome the input, and that you thank them for the input even when you don't agree with the input. You asked for it, they offered it, thank them for it. And then I'm going to tell you the last one is to apologize. I continue to be stunned by how difficult it is for most people in general to apologize when they screw up. And as business owners, we're automatically in a high-risk category for not apologizing. We're king of our own kingdom. I don't have to apologize. Pay attention to whose signature is at the bottom of the company checks. Why do I need to apologize? And the reason you need to apologize is because when you can do that, you become a stronger leader. You engage better buy-in from your people. You build a stronger culture within your organization, which means that you're ultimately going to attract better people to your organization. So I always start with those three things. And I borrowed that from a guy named Marshall Goldsmith in his book called What Got You Here Won't Get You There. And when I was working first, front lines with our clients, I don't do that so much anymore, but when I was working front lines with our clients, that was a book that I would frequently send to them and say, now we're going to go through this book. Because Goldsmith outlines behaviors in there, not like I do, but behaviors in there that he identifies in the guys that he works with, the ladies that he works with, and I see them. So it's helped my clients.
Right. So right now in your organization, what kind of a size team are you managing?
We've got 16 folks here. We have 9 consultants. Our newest one will be joining us a little over a week from now. So that will make 9 consultants, including me. So aside from that, we've got 16. We have a sales and marketing director, digital guy, another digital guy. We have administrative staff, operations.
And you also have quite a few people that are in these roles that have very much hands-on experience inside of the restoration business, correct?
All of our consultants have experience in business. Typically they came from a larger organization, not always, but typically from a larger organization where they occupied either a senior leadership or an ownership position in that business. Now, some of them were in Fortune 500 companies, so they had senior leadership, senior management positions in different functional areas. Rico, the way that we have organized our consulting team, now this is just a consulting team, is into the different functional areas of a business. If you look at the functional areas of a restoration company, there are 4: admin and accounting, HR, sales and marketing, and operations. So we have experts, people who have had a career in those functional areas. And so we bring them together as a team, and then as a team, we work with our clients. So they're able to bring that perspective. Now, some of them have a background in the restoration industry. But quite frankly, that isn't a key criteria for us bringing a consultant on board.
Right.
They're business issues. We don't deal with the technical stuff very much. I mean, occasionally a little bit, but not very much. It's how do I develop this executive? How do I develop his team or her team? And then how do we keep moving that thing forward so that it continues to grow, sustain it?
Right. Typically, do you have an ideal size company that you would bring on, or from time to time you're like, hey, you know what, for the smaller restoration companies or watermet companies or roofing companies, maybe they don't have a big team, maybe they're not that big yet. Would you say, hey, you know what, you're too small for us, or do you kind of just bring on anybody who is open and willing to get to the next level? And do you have some kind of package and consulting that you can give anybody depending on whatever the size they're at?
I think, yeah. Before I answer that question, the important thing isn't the size the company is now. The important thing is the size the company wants to be, the owner wants to be. Our job is to take them from where they are now to where they want to be, regardless of where they are or where they want to go. Now, with that said, while most of the clients that we work with are over $1 million in revenue, we do work with clients who are under $1 million in revenue. Many of those owners are frustrated with what they've achieved in their business. They feel that the skills that they need to scale it above that to $1 million, $2 million, $3 million, whatever they want, they don't possess. So they look to us to bring that to the table, and then the coaching to walk them through that change process. But we also work with clients who are $50 million, $70 million in revenue. Obviously, the challenges and the issues that we deal with that size client, totally different than with the client who might be $500,000 in revenue. But they're both important.
Right.
They're both important.
Right. Yeah, everybody's just at a different stage and is looking to accomplish whatever their next goal is, right? That next evolution in their business. Have you found that there is a financial number that becomes more difficult? In other words, like people always say, the first $100,000 that you make in your career, like that's like the hardest, right? And then they say, well, from 100,000 to $1 million, making that first $1 million is very, very difficult. But then once you make 1 million, it's easy to make, 3, 4, 5. But then from 5 to get to 15, like all of a sudden it takes a totally different mindset, totally different set of motivation. Everything has to change, right? Like what got you to that level won't get you to the next level. Have you noticed, like as you're consulting and as businesses are growing, that there's like a number that once they hit that, like they really have to revamp everything that they've done again in order to go ahead and hit that next level?
Yeah. The first one, there are multiple places for that, Rico. You're right. The first one that I would identify would be $1 million in revenue. And what we do, we refer to that as companies that are under $1 million, we refer to as stage 1 companies. Companies between 1 million and 50, that's 50 million, are stage 2 companies. And that $1 million mark seems to be a real watershed number for so many businesses. So much so that, depending on whose numbers you read, anywhere from 94 to 96% of all businesses in North America never scale above $1 million in revenue. That's not a misspeak here. 94 to 96% of all businesses never get above $1 million. That's not a judgment. It's just a statistic. Most small business owners, entrepreneurs, don't want to scale above $1 million. They're happy with the business that they have. They've achieved the things that they want out of life or are achieving. So they're fine with that. And then we're fine with that. The other thing that we find, that at least that I find in dealing with companies, is that to get it over $1 million and to keep it over $1 million, you need to start building the team around you. And that means that this is where you first start seeing that management level come into the organization. Well, if you look at the behaviors of the entrepreneur, most of us aren't good managers. We're not. Okay, we're good entrepreneurs. We might be reasonable leaders. Many of us are pretty good rulers, and we kind of like ruling our kingdoms. So when we bring managers in who are paying to give us ideas, we struggle with that. We struggle with keeping them. We also struggle with identifying them. And so we make just a whole bunch of mistakes, below that level. We promote the person that really shouldn't be promoted, doesn't want to be promoted, but they're loyal, I trust them, so we promote them. Okay, or we surround ourselves with family members, who may not want to be there, but they know us, okay? This is especially true with our spouses. They know us, right. And they know that most of us are wild cards. And they're figuring, you know what? The whole family income is tied to the decisions this guy's going to make. I want to be close to those decisions. All right, so that's why they come on board. So it's when you get it above that you really start getting into that team environment. But it's valuable at any level in the organization. But it becomes more critical as you grow. So let me go back. This is the long-winded way around your question. Let me go back. What you find as you're continuing to grow that organization and the people in it, the challenges change. You reach there is an undefined area that Doug Tatum refers to as no man's land, and we see this in businesses. And typically it comes in, anywhere. It can start at $4 million, it can start at $5 million, up to about $7 or $10 million. It's very difficult to maintain the level of profitability in that size business that you had in a smaller company. It's still possible,
percentage-wise,
but you're bringing higher level talent on board that requires higher compensation in all different forms. It takes them a while to get their feet settled and to start producing at the level that you ultimately want to have. So you're throwing an awful lot of cash out at the things and the structures in the business and the people in the business that you need to keep growing that business. So that's one of those areas that you're referring to. So we see it at $1 million. We see it again anywhere from $4 to $7, $8, $10 million. You get over $10 million, and now you're dealing with a different animal again. And again, don't etch 10 million in stone. It shows up around that time. But every one of these stages, Rico, that owner plays a critical role, the CEO. And I've written about this. And their job changes. The responsibilities, I should say, of that job changes. Functionally, it's basically the same thing. Chart the course, build a team, track performance. I mean, that's the CEO's job. But the way you go about it changes radically because you're dealing with different challenges. You're dealing with different levels of competence in your people, and money moves so much faster through your organization that's a learning skill that many entrepreneurs have to acquaint themselves with. The speed that money moves through your business at $1 million, totally different than at $2 or $3 or $10 million or $20 million.
Right.
So now you take it from $10 million. You see I've noticed a little bit of a blip at around 15. A lot of times you'll see businesses get up to 15, 16, 17 million, and they'll kind of bob up and down in that range. You get up over 20 million, that's another seems to be another watershed number, where again you go through the financing issues that are involved in an organization that size. Once again, a level of management in there that you didn't have before. So that means the owner has to know how to manage those folks, get them to work together as a team, manage the finances. So I don't know if that helped, if that answered your question.
Yeah, absolutely right. I guess the main thing is every business starts off somewhere, right? And a lot of people in the restoration industry, they didn't come into the business with $400,000, $500,000 to start off. Like, that's not typically how most people got into the business. They bought a couple of air movers, they got a couple of dehumidifiers, they got some HEPA air scrubbers, and boom, they were in business, right? Like they were just trying to make it happen.
Yep.
And things start to change, right? Like depending on how much revenue you have coming in, things change very, very quickly. I mean, first you're just trying to make like, hey, how can I go ahead and generate $10,000 a month in revenue? Like,
Yep.
Let's just start there. Let's just be really basic, right?
Yep.
And then you're going to hit a certain number and you start running into the growth issues, right? Because now it's really simple to be a guy in a truck who's basically has a lifestyle business, right? You do a couple of projects a month and you're good to go. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's a beautiful thing if that's what you're into, right? Great. But then you have like this middle of the road, right? Where it's like, okay, you know that you're busy, but now you have to start making hiring decisions. You have to start bringing in personnel, but you're not quite busy enough to justify the personnel. So now it's like you constantly have this battle. And I would assume that if this is happening at the lower revenue, it definitely happens at, $1 million, $2 million, $3 million in revenue. And every time that you hit this scale, right, as you're like going up the ladder, I got to imagine those would be very, very similar issues, not only financially, but from a personnel standpoint, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you make a good point. You talk about lifestyle businesses. In my personal opinion, I'll argue the fact that any small business is a lifestyle business. At the end of the day, we grow them to, I refer to it as the 3 C's, okay? Comfort, competence, and confidence. We'll grow our businesses to those levels. If I look at the competence, do I have the technical skills? Do I know how to manage the money? Do I know how to manage the team? Those are competence. Am I confident in the decisions that I'm making? If I'm not confident in the decisions I'm making, I'm going to hesitate, which means I could stall. But then you go down to that last one, and that's the comfort. Rico, we build them to our own level of comfort. And when our businesses are small, and think about it, when we're not making enough money to support our families or to buy our car or whatever it is, we get busy, we start growing that business until we become comfortable again. And we kind of hang there as long as we're comfortable. But then all of a sudden, as we become uncomfortable with that level, time to grow again. And we grow it up until we become not confident, or that we don't want to take the risk, so we'll stall it again. We'll stop the growth there until we become uncomfortable again, and then we'll go through that. And so we kind of go through that up and down gesture or up and down motion as we grow our businesses. But almost always it goes back to that comfort level. And the higher you go in your business, the more that comfort is being determined by the people within your organization and the decisions that you have to make as that entrepreneur. I refer to that as the entrepreneurial paradox. And just as you mentioned, okay, you start your business because you want to make X amount of dollars, because you got fired by your previous employer, or you got tired of the decisions he was making, figured you could do it better. Gerber refers to that as an entrepreneurial seizure. All right, so you go and you start your own business, and it's going pretty well, but at some point we grow our businesses to the point where we grew our business to where we're doing a job that we aren't comfortable doing, we were never trained to do, and we don't like doing. So unless we address that ourselves, that's the size our business is going to grow to, in spite of what we tell the consultant.
Right.
And so a big part of our job as consultants, as we work with the client, is to better understand what that level is and how committed they are to it. Because anytime you're going to move beyond it, it's going to involve pain and sacrifice. And so, I talk to business owners about whether they have a mission and how solid that mission is. Not because it's fancy words, but because that is the thing that they're going to go back to when they experience pain and the sacrifice in order to grow that business. What's your mission? How important is that to you? And the more important that mission is, and I'm not talking about fancy words hanging on a wall, I'm talking about what's in their heart. So when that mission is compelling to them, they'll work through those difficult change points. They'll work through that pain, that sacrifice, to achieve the mission. That's what you want to see.
Right. And it's important to have a mission. So many business owners, unfortunately, don't have a mission.
Yeah.
They conceptually have it, and that's fine. But the problem is that when stuff really gets rough, right, and you're having those stressful nights or the stressful projects or personnel issues, all of this, the mission that you had in your head, all of a sudden, like, you can't find it. Mm-hmm. That's why it's important, in my opinion, is to have it written down. Like, what is it that's going, it's something that you can go back to, look, review, and say, this is why I'm doing what I'm doing. And I think there's so much power in having a document of your inner thoughts, your mission, saying, hey, this is why I'm doing what I'm doing. This is what I want to go ahead and do for my community, for my family, for my employees, whatever the case may be. And every time that gets rough, which is inevitable, everybody in any business is going to have a rough go at something. To be able to look at that document and gives you a little bit of peace of mind. Like, I think that there's a tremendous amount of power there.
There's an enormous amount of power there. Unfortunately, I think mission statements get a bad rap, because we feel like they're supposed to be touchy-feely and things that we hang on the wall to look good, and that's not at all what it is. I just had a conversation with another business owner about that whole business and the work that was going to be involved in going where he said he wanted the business to go. And I just made that comment that, when push comes to shove, you're going to come back to that mission. The other thing I said to him was, and this is just my experience, Rico, okay, in working with small business owners, most of us, I'm going to say most of us, don't start our businesses with a mission in mind. We don't, okay? We're looking at putting food on the table. I guess that's
Absolutely.
a mission. That's
Absolutely.
a mission.
That's the mission, right?
I think the one where we really get into articulating a good mission that we can get our people to buy into, we either arrive at, we kind of back into them through struggle or through success. And it's only through those two things, those two forces, that we're really able to come up with that mission. Almost like a piece of coal being turned into a diamond. I mean, a piece of coal disintegrates in your hands. As many missions, when we start them, they disintegrate in our hands. It's only through the force of struggle or the force of success that they're able to be forced into something of value. And so that's when we really come up with them.
Right. And the other thing, too, is kind of circling back to this growth that we were talking about, right? And the importance of having a mission statement as things get rough, but also by having a coach or having a mentor or having a consultant, that gives the business owner, should give the business owner a tremendous amount of confidence to say, hey, look, you know what? My business has grown to a certain degree beyond my limits, right? Like now I'm taking on different projects that I wasn't trained to do, or I'm getting into this new side of the business that I'm like, I'm a fish out of water. Like I have no idea what's going on. If you don't have a mentor, like that's it. Like that's as far as you're going to go. Cause you may never take that dive and saying, you know what, I'm going to figure this out. Like it might be too scary, right? But having a coach, having a mentor, having a consultant that can kind of walk you through it and give you just that little bit of confidence, that guidance, and provide you with a roadmap is extremely, extremely valuable, I would imagine.
Let me give you an example of that. And you're right on with that, Rico. Let me give you an example. You know that we do business planning retreats. You've attended business planning retreats that we do. And one of the things that we do as part of the strategic planning exercise of the business planning retreat is we help clients that are attending this thing, or non-clients, just business owners who are attending it, to draft their mission statement and their vision statements. Now, it's not going to be done while they're there, but you can get ideas down. What I've seen over and over with respect to both of those, mission and vision, is that you'll see an owner sitting there struggling with coming up with fancy words or things that really sound impressive. But you can see that they're not bought in. Just having a conversation, you can see they're not bought into it. And so I'll ask them to stop writing. Okay, let's just talk. And then I'll start talking with them at their table. And I'll say, tell me about you. What did you do before? What brought you to this industry? Tell me about your family. Tell me about what you do outside of business. And invariably, when they start to talk, I'll write words down, not whole phrases, but just words. You start listening to the things that they say, and either words repeat themselves or concepts repeat themselves. So I'll jot those down. And then when we finally wrap that conversation up, it's very, very loose and easy and conversational. I'll say, these are the words that I was noticing you continually come back to. This sounds to me like something that's very important to you. Is that right? And they go, oh yeah, this is what I'm about. There's your mission. Okay, now it's just a matter of wordsmithing it. But this is the heart. This is where your heart is. Okay, don't try screwing it up with fancy sayings. Okay, or by writing Googles or somebody else that you read that you thought was really cool. Write your own. It's got to come from your heart.
Right. And a lot of people too, when they're creating their mission statements and they're creating this, document, right? They're like, oh man, what are other people going to think about what's written down? And I think that you kind of try to make it a little bit too politically correct sometimes.
Oh, yeah.
Like it needs to be about you. Like it's your business, and it needs to be genuine. Like you need to be able to look at this thing and be like, oh yeah, this is definitely, I resonate with this. Obviously it's me. You need to see yourself in that document, I believe.
Years ago, I was working with a guy. He ran a very large, successful business, and he was a real character. And so we were talking about mission statements. He goes, you want to know my mission statement? I said, yeah, I'd like to know your mission statement. He goes, make money. He goes, you want to know the second paragraph? Make more money. And I thought, you know what? That's what he's after. Okay, that's your mission, baby.
And that is fine. I mean, I talk to so many business owners all the time, and I'm like, just be honest. Like, and I've seen some of them, right? Because they've been like gracious enough to show me what they have. Yep. And I'm like, come on, come on. You could do like this is. I'm not buying this. Like, it sounds good to put on your website. Like this is what your mission is, but it's so much better just to be like, if you have a business owner who's out there is like, what's my mission statement? Make money. Yeah. Like you should live that up, and you should honestly, that should be something that's on your wall, and that way everybody's on the exact same page. Great. But like when you're trying to, like you said, wordsmith it and start to create this stuff that's not really real, right? Make it almost too poetic. It just it loses all of what it's supposed to stand for.
Oh, it does. And you're writing somebody else's. You can't. Don't write somebody else.
Right.
Write your own.
So what are some of the other major pain points that you see, that you talk about in the book, that you see business owners have? I mean, we've covered quite a few of them thus far. Yeah. Which ones? But we still have a few out there. So which ones haven't we covered yet? We definitely spoke about the ego, which you think is probably the biggest one, and I would have to agree with that.
Yeah, and just one more comment on the ego. When you think about it, when you live in a country like the U.S., and we can complain about politics, we can complain about the country all day long, but the bottom line is, really, if you're in the U.S. and you own a business, you got a pretty smoking gig going on, all right? And so it's easy for us to let our egos play too big of a role. I think we take too much credit for our success, and we really shouldn't. So with that aside, Probably the next one well, really there's a couple, but one that I see show up frequently is drift, entrepreneurial drift, and that is where we don't focus on those priorities that we need to focus on in order to make our businesses grow, but yet we're easily distracted. And in my experience, many, I'll even say most, small business owners have an easily distracted personality style. Quite frankly, that's one of the things that led many of us, present company included, to start the careers that they currently have. That's not good or bad. It's just that when it gets out of control and we're constantly changing directions, that's when it becomes an issue. Rico, early in my career, I noticed this behavior pretty early on, and I thought I'd do a little bit of research with the clients I was working with at the time, and so I asked them, how many do you have ADD? And of the clients I was working with, 40%, seriously, 40% of the clients I was working with at the time had been clinically diagnosed with ADD. And I thought about it, well, that makes sense. I mean, a small business, disaster restoration business, is custom made for somebody with ADD because it's large motor skills, easily distracted, get to be hero, and very little accountability. All right. At that time. What's not to love about that gig, right? So, but nonetheless, it's a strength at a time. As your business grows, it becomes a serious weakness because the people in your organization don't have the time to gain traction on the things that you say you want to accomplish. And you frustrate the daylights out of them and you exhaust them. And so often what happens is that the good people end up leaving your organization because they haven't had a chance to be successful, to demonstrate their competence. So they're going to go someplace where the owner isn't scattered and they're going to have a chance to demonstrate their success. And so it becomes a real issue with employee retention, with just constantly distracted priorities. And
Right. So like, it's, for example, this would be a business owner who's like, hey, I want to go ahead and take on this sector of the market. Yep. And next week is like, hey, you know what, let's put that on pause. Actually, we want to go ahead and do this other thing over here because I heard that there's like, good opportunity. And then you're right. It's like, it's the employee that you have, the team member that you have doesn't have any really, has zero direction. Like they don't really know like what they're going to walk into on a Monday morning. Like, what business are we getting into this week, right? It's that shiny object syndrome that a lot of entrepreneurs suffer from.
Rico, actually, even this podcast, there's a risk with doing this podcast. There's a risk to your listeners with doing this, or viewers with doing this podcast, and that is they're going to watch the podcast and they're going to go back to their office and go, hey, I just heard this consultant on Rico's podcast. He talked about we need to do this, 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 this. And everybody in the office is going to roll their eyes and go, okay, here's the list du jour. And then tomorrow it's going to be another list du jour. And on and on. It's when we're able to recognize that behavior within ourselves, and we all have it to a certain extent. We all get excited about things. But when we're able to weigh those things, the new things that we're talking about, against the things that we're currently working on and say, there's value to that new thing, but we haven't made enough progress on this one yet. So let's just put this one in a parking lot for 2022, and let's just keep following through with this one. Very difficult for many entrepreneurs. In my personal opinion, and I may not be popular making this comment, but in my personal opinion, this is one of the reasons that so many small business owners have a spouse in their business, typically, and I know this is gender biased, but typically running the office or doing the books. And one of the reasons is because, the spouse, again, I'm going to go back to that. The spouse is realizing, I know this guy and I know how scattered he is. I want to work to keep him, between the white lines. Right. I also feel that a big part of the reason that they churn office managers and bookkeepers up until then is that those people are not married to them, are not related to them, and they're not willing to make the emotional commitment to seeing this person through. So they leave. And that's
Right.
that's unfortunate.
Yeah, and it's something that happens quite a bit, and so, again, I've heard tons and tons of stories, but I think that it's just the nature of an entrepreneur, right? An entrepreneur is exploding with all of these ideas.
Oh, yeah.
for the most part, right? And they just want more. You want to be up on the latest things. You want to try to expand as much as you possibly can, and you're always looking for these different opportunities. However, that being said, there's so much power when you take one task at a time. Now, mind you, full disclosure, I'm not good at that because I've got like 55 ideas a day and I want to execute on all 55 a day, right? But I think that there might be perhaps a happy middle where if you get really good at delegating, if you get really good at having key people, key players that have a specific role for what this new venture is, and you have the ability to commit to that for whatever time frame that is, right? Until you see it through X amount of months, whatever the case may be. I think that there's a happy middle. I mean, there's tons of entrepreneurs out there that don't own one business. They own 10, 20, 30, 40 businesses, and they're wildly successful. Now, I know that in my 24 hours, I cannot physically run 50 businesses, yet there are people, right, that are running tons of successful businesses and making more money than we could possibly imagine. How is it that they're doing that? Well, number one, I've identified an opportunity, but then more important than that, they identified the right people to manage that opportunity and gave them the time that they needed in order to execute that. Like, what are your thoughts on that philosophy?
Well, I think it's accurate. Rico, again, to go back to the business planning programs that we do, as part of that program, we help that client identify 2 or 3, what we refer to them as major business objectives. They're basically priorities that we're going to focus on for the next year. And then we lay out tactics and strategies and projects that people have to do in order to accomplish that. Now, that's the easy part, is to identify them, because this owner, these are the most important things to me today. All right, so they write them down. The hard part is the execution. So I'm going to go to your comment about hiring the right people. And that's exactly right. It's the starting point. The important part is to listen to those people. Our Violand Management is a good example of that. I feel that we have an extremely strong team here. And I know that a big piece of their job, especially a couple of them here on the management team, their job is to help hold me accountable to following through on the things that we all agreed on that we want to achieve in 2021, 2022, whatever it is. And it's not uncommon, well, it's not real common, but occasionally they'll find themselves approaching me and saying, hey, boss, I know you want to do this thing over here. You just said that. But can you show me on the business plan and our strategic plan where that exists? Or is this just another example of e-drift? And they'll hold me accountable. And that's part of their job, is to hold me accountable. But I have to be willing to listen to them.
Right. Because and that's where the big divide is, right? Because as the quote unquote boss, right, you are the master of your domain.
Yep.
When you say, I've got this great idea, we need to execute on this, you don't even though it's not the right time, it's not the right, you don't have the right personnel, you don't want someone telling you that that's a bad idea. Like, that's kind of like a tough pill to swallow for a lot of entrepreneurs. So going back to your point, having the willingness to, number one, have the right people in place, but then also to trust the decision that you made to put that person there, because they're going to have the ability to tell you, hey, boss, listen, I don't think this is a good idea right now. And for you to go ahead and be like, you know what? You're right. I hired you to go ahead and make these kind of decisions and to kind of put me in check. I mean, there's so much value in having those kind of team members.
Now go back to that hiring decision. Just take a look at how that impacts the hiring decision. And, if I, as an owner, am not willing to search out those people who will bring good technical skills to what I'm hiring them to do, whether it's operations, accounting, sales and marketing, HR, whatever it is, if they not only have to have the technical skills to do that job, they have to have the emotional strength to stand toe-to-toe with me. That's what I need. Technical skills, you can hire that stuff anywhere. It's having the emotional strength to stand toe-to-toe with me and help mentor me as the owner. And if I'm not willing to do that because I don't want to hear it, so I'm resigning myself to having a company that may not achieve the things that I want it to achieve, simply because I am standing in the way.
Do you feel that most business owners out there make bad hiring decisions out of fear that they're hiring someone smarter than they are, more capable than they are, or that they're breeding potential competition?
I don't think most. I think some. Some do that. I think most bad hiring decisions are made because they don't know how to identify them. They haven't identified exactly what they're looking for, and therefore they don't know how to identify those skills or those talents in the people that they're recruiting. As far as an intentional not hiring somebody, yes, I have seen that happen. I don't think it's the majority of the time though, especially as the business moves up and as that owner matures as a business owner, away from needing to be the king of the kingdom. When they mature away from that, they're much more willing, it appears to me that they're much more willing, usually, to attract that higher level talent. And I'll tell you what, Rico, you can see the impact that has on a business when they bring that person on. And usually it just takes one. Get the first one on there. And then when that owner becomes comfortable realizing that this really good hire doesn't want to take over the business, they're not going to leave and take all your trade secrets someplace else. Now they're comfortable enough to bring the next one on. So that team, in the best scenario, they start surrounding themselves with other A players. We refer to them as A players.
Right. What I was referring to is, especially in the growth stage, right? These smaller businesses, guy in a truck, maybe 4 or 5 team members, like really small organizations that are really looking to take it to the next level. Sometimes once you have the technicians out there, right, that are doing whatever it is, whether it's carpet cleaning, whatever it is that you do. Okay, good. So now you got those guys out of the way. You got a pretty good crew. They're trained. They are making sure that your reputation is well taken care of with each and every single client. Great. Well, the next key player now really becomes a more of an executive role. Not to say that they may not be in the field, but they might be a project manager. They might be doing your estimating. They might be doing that. They're probably still wearing a couple of different hats, right?
Yep.
That's where I find that a lot of businesses get bottlenecked. And this is by having conversations with tons of business owners. All of a sudden they're like, you know what? I just can't, I don't know. This guy looks like a shark. Like, he's too good at this. Like, I don't really know if they're going to stick around. So, and this is through conversation, right? And I don't think that they consciously have this conversation with themselves or with their hiring manager. But when you're just casually talking about it, you could see or hear like all of this fear-driven decision-making, right?
Yep.
So that's what I've noticed on the smaller side of the businesses. Now, I'm assuming that once you have those key players now that have inspired some confidence, business owner changes their tune a little bit.
Yeah, and I agree with that. Usually we see that happen between $750,000 and $1.5 million, because that's where that management level first really comes in. Starts out as supervision and goes into management. And so it is, but take a look at that. It goes back to that $1 million mark, right? Moving from stage 1 to stage 2. So that is where we see that hesitation. And I would be more inclined to agree with you being a major contributor to not bringing those people on at that point. But being able to get beyond that is huge.
Yeah, exactly. So, and again, and just, I would assume that, for the business owner, who's just starting off in business, to go ahead and get that one key player that can go ahead and free up that time that then can go ahead and start expanding on the business, right? And eventually get to the point to where you're hiring people that are making those hiring decisions for you, right? That's really, really good at the human resources portion of the business. Because again, I've always said, like, every trade really is a commodity. Like, there's nothing special about what anybody does. Like, if you really boil it down, especially in the trades, like, sure, you have some better skilled labor than others, granted, right? But as a general rule of thumb, like, if you're a painter, you're painting. If you're doing dry outs, you're putting down a couple of fans and a couple of dehues. Like, anybody can do that. But the real talent and the difference lies in the people that are doing these tasks, right? And so, like, building the organization is so important. And it's like the biggest skill set that most business owners are missing. Like, that's the biggest one, I feel.
Rico, we're in the people business. Every business is in the people business. We just deliver different products, whether it's restoration, painting, roofing, whatever it is. You're just delivering a different product. Technical skills
This
you
is
can
true.
teach. Okay?
Yep, exactly. So Chuck, book is now available everywhere. The Entrepreneurial Conspiracy. It's available on Amazon, right?
Yep. Barnes and Noble,
is it on-
Amazon. Yep.
Anywhere you get your literature.
Books A Million,
You can
yep.
find it anywhere. Books A Million, great. And then also from a consulting standpoint, where can people go ahead and find you online?
Violand.com. Just go to Violand.com
Violand.com.
and you'll find out all about us. We're just launching you're the first one to know this. We're just launching a Chuck Violand page around the book because we have a lot of books in the process of being written right now. So that one, I think it will be launched either today or Monday.
Oh,
So,
that's
yeah.
amazing. How many more books are on the horizon?
Right now we've got about 4. One is we're in final edits for that one. The other one is in the early writing stages, and then we have 2 that will be following up after those.
So you're going to be pretty busy, huh?
Yeah, it's become a big part of my job.
Yeah. Well, Chuck, thank you so much for coming on the show. I mean, we probably could have gone for, another 4 hours just at picking your brain here and just asking you so many questions. But again, anybody who's out there listening that wants to learn more about Chuck, just go to Violand.com. Again, that's Violand.com. And make sure that you go on Amazon or wherever it is that you get your books and pick up your own copy of The Entrepreneurial Conspiracy. I read it. He was very nice to send me a copy before it was actually even out for sale. And it was a good read. So I enjoyed it very much. Chuck, thank you so much. And we will catch you guys later.
Rico, thank you very much.
You've been listening to Restoration Domination, interviewing the restoration business's top industry insiders, the movers and shakers, the hustlers and hackers. We hope you've gotten some useful and practical information from the show. Make sure to like, rate, and review. And we'll be back soon. But in the meantime, hook up with us on Instagram. Find Rico at Rico Garcia Jr. Find Ecotech Pro at Ecotech Pro. And check out the YouTube channel at Ecotech Pro. Till next time, this is Restoration Domination. Hustle, hack, dominate.